Victoria Ashford stood in the center of her Manhattan penthouse, surveying the room with the practiced eye of someone who had hosted 100 events just like this one. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across marble floors. Waiters in crisp white shirts moved between clusters of wealthy guests, offering champagne and tiny portions of food that cost more than most people's weekly groceries. This was her annual charity gala. The same faces showed up every year, wrote the same generous checks, and went home feeling good about themselves. Victoria had built her fortune in technology, selling her company for $3 billion before she turned 50. Now at 52, these events were more obligation than pleasure. She adjusted the diamond bracelet on her wrist and smiled at a couple approaching her. They wanted to talk about their yacht. Victoria nodded politely, her mind already elsewhere. Across the room, her maid Rosa was nervously straightening the appetizer table. Rosa had worked for Victoria for almost 8 years, coming 3 times a week to keep the massive penthouse spotless. She was reliable, quiet, and never asked for anything beyond her paycheck. But tonight Rosa looked uncomfortable. She kept glancing toward the kitchen door, wringing her hands. Victoria excused herself from the yacht conversation and walked over. "Rosa, is everything all right?" Rosa jumped slightly. "Yes, Mrs. Ashford, I'm sorry. It's just that the catering company called. 2 of their servers got sick. They asked if I could help tonight, and I had to bring Miguel, my son. I had no one to watch him. I'm so sorry." Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "It's fine." "Where is he?" "In the kitchen. He's 14. Very responsible. He's helping wash glasses." "That's perfectly fine, Rosa. Don't worry about it." But Rosa still looked anxious. Victoria returned to her guests, already forgetting the conversation. An hour passed. The party hit its peak of noise and energy. Victoria was trapped in a discussion about crypto investments when she noticed something from the corner of her eye. A teenage boy stood near her Steinway grand piano, absolutely transfixed. He wasn't touching it, just staring at the gleaming black instrument like it was a spaceship that had landed in the living room. This had to be Rosa's son. He was thin, wearing clothes that were clean but clearly hand-me-downs. His dark hair was neatly combed, and his brown eyes were locked on the piano with an intensity that seemed almost inappropriate for a kid his age. Victoria excused herself again, this time heading toward the boy. Her heels clicked on the floor and he jumped, looking guilty. "I wasn't touching anything, ma'am." "I'm sorry." His voice was quiet but respectful. Victoria found herself amused. Most teenagers she encountered were either dismissive or trying too hard to impress her. This one just seemed genuinely nervous. "Do you play?" she asked, more out of politeness than real interest. The boy's eyes lit up for just a second, then dimmed. I've taught myself a little. Just for fun. I'm sorry, I should get back to the kitchen." Victoria was already pulling out her phone, checking a message from her assistant. Without really thinking about it, she said, "Go ahead. Try it." "What?" "The piano. Go ahead and play something." She wasn't even looking at him now, typing a response about a meeting next Tuesday. "Are you sure?" "I don't want to disturb your guests." Victoria glanced up briefly. "It's fine. Consider it payment for helping out tonight." She meant it as a casual gesture, the kind of thing rich people do to feel magnanimous. Let the helps kid plink around on the piano for a minute. It would make a nice story for Rosa to tell her family. The boy, Miguel, approached the piano bench like he was walking on sacred ground. He sat down carefully, adjusted his position, and placed his hands on the keys. His fingers were trembling slightly. Victoria was barely paying attention. She sent her text and then turned to respond to someone calling her name. Then the music started. It wasn't plinking. It wasn't a beginner stumbling through chopsticks or a simple melody. The sound that filled the penthouse was rich, complex, and achingly beautiful. Victoria's conversation died mid-sentence. She turned slowly toward the piano. Miguel's entire body had transformed. The nervous boy was gone. In his place sat someone completely absorbed in the music, his fingers moving across the keys with fluid precision. His eyes were closed, his face peaceful. The melody was haunting. Victoria didn't know much about classical music, but even she could tell this wasn't simple. The notes cascaded like water, building and retreating, telling a story without words. Around the room, conversation stopped. Champagne glasses paused halfway to lips. One by one, every guest turned toward the piano, drawn by the unexpected beauty filling the space. Victoria felt something uncomfortable stirring in her chest. This wasn't supposed to happen. The maid's son wasn't supposed to play like this. The piece went on for several minutes. Miguel's hands moved with impossible grace, his thin frame swaying slightly with the emotion of the music. He played like someone who had been doing this for decades, not a kid who allegedly taught himself. When the final note faded, the silence in the room was absolute. Then someone started clapping. Within seconds, the entire party was applauding. Miguel opened his eyes, looking startled, as if he'd forgotten where he was. His face flushed deep red. He stood up quickly, nearly knocking over the bench. Victoria's guests crowded around him, asking questions. Where did he study? Who was his teacher? How long had he been playing? Miguel looked overwhelmed, backing away from the attention. I learned from videos online. I'm sorry, I should go. Victoria pushed through the crowd. She needed to regain control of her party, of the situation. This had gotten too big, too strange. That was lovely, she said, her voice cool and dismissive. Beginner's luck, I suppose. Very nice. Now let's let Miguel get back to helping his mother. She turned to her guests with a bright smile. Wasn't that charming? Now I believe they're bringing out the dessert. She steered people away from the piano, her hand firm on Miguel's shoulder, guiding him toward the kitchen. Rosa appeared in the doorway, her face a mixture of pride and mortification. Rosa, your son plays well. Very entertaining. But let's have him focus on the dishes now, shall we? Rosa nodded quickly, pulling Miguel into the kitchen. Through the closing door, Victoria caught a glimpse of the boy's face. The light that had been there while he played was completely gone. He looked small again, diminished. Victoria returned to her guests, laughing off their questions about Miguel. She poured herself another glass of wine and threw herself back into hosting. But for the rest of the night, she couldn't quite shake the sound of that music. It followed her through conversations, lingered in quiet moments, and she found herself increasingly irritated by it. By the time the last guest left and the catering company packed up, Victoria was exhausted. Rosa and Miguel left quietly through the service entrance, barely saying goodbye. Victoria walked to the piano and ran her finger along the keys, not pressing hard enough to make sound. The instrument was worth over $200,000. She'd bought it because wealthy people were supposed to have nice pianos even if they never played them. She went to bed telling herself that Miguel's playing had been adequate for an amateur, nothing special, certainly nothing to think about. But that night, she dreamed of music she couldn't understand, played by hands she couldn't see. 3 weeks passed after the gala, and Victoria tried to forget about that night. She succeeded for the most part. Her days were filled with board meetings, investor calls, and the endless tasks of managing wealth. But every Tuesday and Thursday when Rosa came to clean, Victoria found herself avoiding her. If she heard the vacuum running, she'd retreat to her home office. If Rosa was in the kitchen, Victoria would suddenly remember an urgent errand. It wasn't that she disliked Rosa. The woman was perfectly pleasant. It was something else, something Victoria couldn't quite name, a nagging feeling that made her uncomfortable. One Thursday afternoon, Victoria was working in her study when Rosa knocked softly on the door. Mrs. Ashford? I'm finished for today. I'll see you next week. Thank you, Rosa. Rosa hesitated in the doorway. Mrs. Ashford, I wanted to thank you again for letting Miguel play your piano. He hasn't stopped talking about it. Victoria looked up from her laptop, forcing a polite smile. Of course. He played nicely. He practices every chance he gets now. There's a church near our apartment, St. Anthony's. Father O'Brien lets Miguel use their old piano after evening mass. He's there almost every night. Victoria felt that uncomfortable stirring again. That's good. Hobbies are important for young people. It's more than a hobby for him, Rosa said quietly. He dreams about it constantly. About playing for real audiences someday. About studying music properly. Victoria's smile tightened. Well, those are nice dreams. Something in her tone made Rosa's expression falter. The maid nodded quickly and left. Victoria returned to her work, but the conversation lingered. She told herself she was being supportive. Dreams were fine. But Rosa needed to be realistic. The music world was brutal. Competitive, you needed connections, expensive training, the right background. A kid from Queens who taught himself from YouTube videos wasn't going to make it, no matter how nicely he played one piece at a party. She was being practical, not cruel. Someone had to be. Meanwhile, across town in a small church in Queens, Miguel was doing exactly what his mother said. Every evening after school, he'd take 2 buses to St. Anthony's, arriving just as evening mass ended. Father O'Brien was a kind man in his 60s who had noticed Miguel hanging around the church 3 months ago, staring through the window at their old upright piano. The instrument was out of tune and missing an ivory key cover, but to Miguel it might as well have been a Steinway. "You can play at any time," Father O'Brien had told him. "No one uses it except for Sunday services." Miguel had nearly cried with gratitude. Now every evening the church echoed with music. Miguel would practice for 2 hours, sometimes 3, his fingers moving over the worn keys with dedication that bordered on obsession. Father O'Brien would sit in the back pew sometimes, listening. He didn't know much about classical music, but he knew passion when he saw it. This boy had something special. One evening, Father O'Brien made a decision. He pulled out his phone and recorded Miguel playing a complex piece, something Russian and dramatic that made the old church walls seem to vibrate. When Miguel finished, breathing hard, Father O'Brien approached him. "Miguel, I want to send this video to someone." "A friend of mine." Miguel looked nervous. "Who?" "His name is Julian Chen. He's a concert pianist. Teaches at Juilliard now. He might be able to help you." Miguel's eyes went wide. "Juilliard?" "Father, people like me don't go to schools like that. Let me send it anyway. What's the harm?" Miguel agreed, though he didn't let himself hope. Hope was dangerous when you lived in a 3-room apartment with your mother and younger sister. When dinner was often just rice and beans. When your shoes had holes you covered with duct tape. Hope was a luxury he couldn't afford. Father O'Brien sent the video that night with a simple message. "Found this kid playing in my church. Thought you should see." Julian Chen was in his apartment in Manhattan when he received the video. He was tired, having just finished teaching 6 hours of lessons to students whose parents paid thousands of dollars for his time. He almost didn't watch it. Church piano videos were usually well-meaning but mediocre, but something made him click play. 30 seconds in, he sat up straighter. By the 1-minute mark, he had paused his dinner. When the video ended, he immediately played it again. This wasn't possible. The technique, the emotion, the interpretation of Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. It was extraordinary, and according to the message, this was a kid with no formal training. Julian played the video a 3rd time, analyzing every moment. The boy made a few small technical errors, but nothing that mattered. What mattered was the soul in the playing, the understanding of the music that usually took decades to develop. He called Father O'Brien immediately. "Tell me about this boy." Father O'Brien explained what he knew. Miguel was 14, self-taught. His mother cleaned houses. They had no money for lessons. "I want to meet him," Julian said. "Tomorrow, if possible." The next evening, Miguel arrived at the church to find Father O'Brien waiting with a stranger, a well-dressed Asian man with kind eyes and an expensive watch. "Miguel, this is Julian Chen. He wants to hear you play." Miguel's hands were shaking so badly he could barely sit at the piano. Julian Chen was famous. Actually famous. Miguel had watched his performances on YouTube hundreds of times. "Just play what you feel," Julian said gently. "Pretend I'm not here." Miguel closed his eyes and played. He poured everything into it, all the frustration of his life, all the beauty he'd found in music, all the dreams he tried not to have. When he finished, Julian was silent for a long moment. "How long have you been playing?" 3 years. "Since I was 11. Who taught you?" "YouTube, mostly. And I watch performances online. I try to copy what I see." Julian shook his head slowly. "This is remarkable. You have genuine talent, Miguel. The kind I see maybe once or twice in my career." Miguel felt tears burning in his eyes. He blinked them back. "I teach at Juilliard," Julian continued. "We have a scholarship program for exceptional students. I'd like you to audition." The words didn't make sense. Miguel stared at him. "Audition? For Juilliard?" "Yes, I can't guarantee you'll get in, but I think you have a real chance." Miguel wanted to feel excited, but reality crashed down immediately. I can't afford the application fee, or lessons to prepare, or..." Julian held up his hand. "Let me worry about that. I'll work with you to prepare. No charge. You just need to practice and show up ready to play your best." That night, Miguel ran home and told his mother everything. Rosa cried, then laughed, then cried again. They stayed up late talking about possibilities that had seemed impossible just hours before. But Rosa's mind kept returning to one person. Mrs. Ashford. She should know about this. Maybe she could help write a letter of recommendation. After all, Miguel had played at her gala. Didn't that count for something? The next Tuesday, Rosa gathered her courage and mentioned it to Victoria. Victoria was in the kitchen making coffee when Rosa brought it up. "Mrs. Ashford, I have some wonderful news about Miguel." Victoria's hand paused on the coffee pot. "Oh?" A teacher from Juilliard heard him play. "He wants Miguel to audition for a scholarship. Can you believe it?" Victoria set down the coffee pot carefully. "Juilliard? That's quite ambitious, and isn't it amazing? This teacher, Julian Chen, he says Miguel has real talent. He's going to help him prepare." Rosa was beaming, but Victoria's expression was cooling by the second. "Rosa, I don't want to discourage you, but the music world is incredibly competitive. There are thousands of talented kids. Most of them don't make it. But this teacher thinks Miguel has a chance." "Teachers say a lot of things," Victoria said dismissively. "I just think Miguel should have realistic expectations. Community college might be a better path. Or trade school. There's good money in trades." Rosa's smile faded. "But he wants to study music. Wanting something doesn't make it practical." Victoria's voice had an edge now. "You work hard, Rosa. You know how the world works. Miguel should focus on careers that will actually support him." Rosa felt something crumble inside her. "I was hoping, since Miguel played at your party, maybe you could write him a letter of recommendation." "For the scholarship?" Victoria's laugh was short and sharp. "A recommendation? Rosa, I barely remember the performance. He played one piece. I'm not qualified to recommend him to a prestigious music school. That would be misleading. But you heard him. You know he's good. I heard him play adequately at a party. That's all." The words hung in the air like poison. Rosa's eyes filled with tears, but she nodded quickly, turning away. "I understand, Mrs. Ashford. I'll get back to work." She left the kitchen before Victoria could see her cry. That evening, Victoria was in her home office when her assistant burst in, practically bouncing with excitement. "Mrs. Ashford, you have to see this video. It's going viral. 5 million views already." "I'm busy, Jennifer." "No, seriously. It's this kid playing piano in a church. The comments are insane. Everyone's calling him a prodigy." Victoria glanced at the phone Jennifer thrust toward her. The video was grainy, shot in dim church lighting. But the boy was unmistakable. Miguel. Playing with the same intensity she'd seen at her gala. But this time the camera captured all of it. The emotion, the technical skill, everything. The comments were flowing in real time. "This kid is incredible. Why isn't he famous? Someone get this boy to a real school." Victoria's face hardened. She handed the phone back. "Interesting," she said flatly. But inside something twisted. It wasn't pride or happiness for Miguel. It was something darker, something that tasted like resentment mixed with regret. She turned back to her computer, but the image of Miguel's face, lost in music in that shabby church, wouldn't leave her mind. The video of Miguel playing in St. Anthony's Church spread like wildfire. Within a week, it had jumped from 5 million views to 15 million. News outlets picked up the story. Local TV stations showed up at the church, asking to interview the mysterious piano prodigy. Miguel handled it all with a mixture of terror and wonder. He'd never imagined this kind of attention. Julian helped shield him from the worst of it, teaching him how to politely decline interviews so he could focus on preparing for his Juilliard audition. The audition was scheduled for 6 weeks away. 6 weeks that would determine everything. Julian worked with Miguel 3 times a week, refining his technique, expanding his repertoire, teaching him the things that YouTube videos couldn't. Miguel soaked it up like he'd been thirsty his whole life and finally found water. Rosa watched her son transform. He walked taller now, spoke with more confidence. Hope had stopped being dangerous and started being fuel, but at work things had become strained. Victoria barely spoke to Rosa anymore beyond basic instructions. When she did speak, her tone was clipped, almost cold. Rosa didn't understand what she'd done wrong. She only knew that asking for that recommendation letter had somehow changed everything. One Thursday, as Rosa was cleaning Victoria's bedroom, she overheard a phone conversation. Victoria was in her home office with the door slightly open. "No, I don't know anything about him," Victoria was saying. "Yes, my maid's son. He played at my gala, but it was just one piece. The internet is making way too much of this." There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. Look, I'm all for encouraging young talent, but people need to be realistic. This boy has no formal training, no connections, no background in music. Juilliard is one of the most competitive schools in the world. The odds of him actually making it? Victoria laughed, but it wasn't a kind sound. I just think everyone's setting him up for a massive disappointment. Rosa stood frozen in the hallway, dusting cloth in hand. She felt sick. Another pause. Of course I care about his well-being. That's exactly why I think someone should tell him the truth before he gets his hopes too high. The music industry is brutal. It's not enough to play well. You need the right family, the right education, the right everything. A scholarship won't change where he comes from. Rosa backed away quietly, her heart pounding. She finished her work in a daze and left without saying goodbye. That evening, she told Miguel what she'd heard. Miguel sat at their tiny kitchen table, staring at his hands. His sister, 9-year-old Sophia, was watching TV in the next room, oblivious. Maybe she's right, Miguel said quietly. Maybe I'm getting my hopes too high. No, Rosa's voice was firm. No, mijo. She's wrong. Julian Chen doesn't think you're wasting your time. All those people watching your video, they don't think you're wasting your time. You have a gift. But what if I fail the audition? Then you fail. But at least you tried. At least you didn't let someone like her convince you not to even try. Miguel looked at his mother. She had cleaned houses for 12 years to support them after his father left. She'd worked through exhaustion and illness and never complained. If she said he should keep going, he'd keep going. Okay, he said. Okay. The day of the audition arrived. Miguel wore the only dress shirt he owned, one Rosa had bought at a thrift store and carefully ironed the night before. Julian met them outside Juilliard's imposing building. Remember, Julian said, putting a hand on Miguel's shoulder. Play for yourself. Play like you're in Father O'Brien's church and no one's watching. That's when you're at your best. Miguel nodded, too nervous to speak. The audition room was intimidating. A gorgeous grand piano sat in the center, and 5 judges sat behind a long table, their faces neutral and professional. They'd seen thousands of auditions. Miguel was just another kid hoping to impress them. He sat at the piano, his hands trembling. He'd prepared 3 pieces, Beethoven's Pathétique Sonata, Chopin's Ballade No. 1, and Bach's Prelude and Fugue in C minor. He started with the Bach. His fingers fumbled the first few notes and panic shot through him. But then he closed his eyes, thought of the church, thought of all the hours he'd spent at that old upright piano, and something settled inside him. The music flowed. For the next 20 minutes, Miguel forgot about the judges, forgot about Victoria's words, forgot about everything except the conversation between his hands and the keys. He played with every ounce of passion and skill he possessed. When he finished, the room was silent. Miguel opened his eyes, breathing hard. One of the judges, a woman with silver hair, was leaning forward. Who did you study with before working with Julian? No one, ma'am. I taught myself, another judge frowned. You're entirely self-taught? 3 years? Yes, sir. The judges exchanged glances. Miguel couldn't read their expressions. He felt like he was going to be sick. Thank you, Miguel, the silver-haired woman said. We'll be in touch within 2 weeks. Julian walked him out. Miguel was shaking. I messed up the Bach at the beginning. Everyone messes up something, Julian said. What matters is that you recovered. And the rest was beautiful. 2 weeks felt like 2 years. Miguel tried to focus on school, but his mind kept drifting. Rosa was jumpy and distracted at work. Even Sophia noticed something was wrong. Then on a Tuesday afternoon, Julian called. Rosa answered, her heart in her throat. Rosa? It's Julian. Is Miguel there? He's at school. What is it? Please, just tell me. There was a pause, then Julian's voice came through warm and excited. He got in. Full scholarship. They want him for next fall. Rosa dropped the phone. She picked it up with shaking hands. Are you sure? Are you absolutely sure? I'm sure. Miguel got into Juilliard, full ride. Rosa, they rarely give full scholarships to anyone, let alone someone his age. The judges were unanimous. They said he's extraordinary. Rosa burst into tears. Happy tears, relieved tears. Tears for every doubt and fear she'd carried. When Miguel got home from school, she was waiting at the door. She didn't say anything, just handed him her phone with the email pulled up. Miguel read it 3 times. Then he looked at his mother, his eyes wide and disbelieving. Is this real? It's real, baby. You did it. Miguel sank onto their old couch and put his face in his hands. His shoulders shook. Sophia ran over, confused, and Rosa pulled both her children close. The story broke the next day. Self-taught teen from Queens earns full scholarship to Juilliard. It was everywhere. Local news, national news, music magazines, social media. People loved it. The underdog story. The kid who overcame impossible odds. The talent that emerged from nowhere. Reporters dug into Miguel's background. They interviewed Father O'Brien, who beamed with pride. They interviewed Julian, who called Miguel one of the most naturally gifted students he'd encountered in 20 years of teaching. And then a reporter asked Rosa about Miguel's first public performance. Rosa, caught off guard by the question, told the truth. He played at a charity gala, in a billionaire's home. That's when I first realized how special he was. Which billionaire? The reporter asked. Rosa hesitated, but then said, Victoria Ashford. I work for her. The reporter's eyes lit up. The Victoria Ashford? The tech billionaire? Yes. What did she think of his playing? Rosa remembered that night, remembered Victoria's dismissive words, remembered the coldness that had followed. But she was a kind woman, and she tried to be diplomatic. She said it was nice. But later, when Miguel was preparing for his audition, she told me he should pursue more realistic careers. She said the music world was too competitive for someone like him, the reporter wrote furiously. She discouraged him? She said trade school might be better. Rosa immediately regretted saying it. But the words were out now, and there was no taking them back. The story exploded in a new direction. Billionaire told Prodigy to give up music. Victoria Ashford tried to crush teens' dreams. Wealthy elite versus working-class genius. Social media erupted. People who'd never heard of Victoria before were suddenly outraged. Her Instagram was flooded with angry comments. Twitter threads dissected every aspect of the story, many adding details that weren't quite accurate but made the narrative more dramatic. Victoria's publicist called her in a panic. We need to make a statement. This is getting out of control. Victoria sat in her penthouse, scrolling through the comments about her. They called her heartless, elitist, cruel. They said she represented everything wrong with wealthy people, that she couldn't recognize talent because she'd never had to work for anything. Some of it stung because parts of it were true. Draft something, she told her publicist. Say I always believed in Miguel. Say I was being protective, cautious. Say I'm thrilled for his success. The statement went out that evening. I've always recognized Miguel's talent. My comments were meant to ensure he understood the challenges ahead, not to discourage him. I'm absolutely thrilled about his acceptance to Juilliard and wish him nothing but success. The internet wasn't buying it. She's lying. Damage control. If she believed in him, why didn't she help him? Victoria's board called an emergency meeting. Several sponsors of her charitable foundation announced they were pulling funding. One used almost the exact words from her statement back at her. We're being cautiously protective of our reputation. Victoria's carefully constructed image was crumbling, and she'd done it to herself. She poured a glass of wine and stood at her floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the Manhattan skyline. Somewhere out there in a small apartment in Queens, Miguel was probably celebrating the biggest achievement of his young life, and she'd tried to convince him not to even try. The wine tasted bitter. Everything tasted bitter. Her phone buzzed with another message from her publicist, another crisis to manage, another statement to approve. Victoria ignored it. For the first time in years, she didn't know what to do. She'd built an empire through intelligence and determination, but she'd somehow failed to see genius when it played piano right in front of her. She'd seen a maid's son. She'd seen someone who didn't fit her idea of success. She'd seen a dozen things that had nothing to do with the boy himself, and now the whole world could see exactly who she was. Victoria's fall from grace happened faster than anyone expected. Within a week of Miguel's story going viral, 3 major sponsors withdrew from her charitable foundation. The foundation had been her pride, the thing that made her feel like more than just another rich person writing checks. Now it was bleeding money and credibility. Her board met without her for the first time in 5 years. When they finally called her in, their faces were serious. Victoria, we need to discuss your role going forward, the chairman said carefully. The public perception issue is affecting our ability to function. Public perception issue. That's what they were calling it. Not the truth, which was that she'd been dismissive and cruel to a talented kid because of her own biases. "I've issued a statement," Victoria said. "I've apologized. Your statement came across as insincere. The damage is done." The chairman shifted uncomfortably. "We think it might be best if you stepped back from public-facing activities for a while." Victoria felt anger flash through her. This was her foundation. She'd started it, funded it, built it from nothing. How long is a while? 6 months. Maybe a year. Until this blows over. She wanted to argue, to fight back. But looking around the table at their faces, she realized something. They weren't wrong. She had done this to herself. "Fine," she said quietly. "I'll step back." The meeting ended quickly after that. Victoria returned to her penthouse feeling hollow. Meanwhile, Miguel's life had become unrecognizable. Suddenly everyone wanted to talk to him. Major news networks requested interviews. Talk shows called. A documentary filmmaker wanted to follow him for a year. Julian helped filter it all, protecting Miguel from the overwhelming attention while letting through the opportunities that actually mattered. One invitation stood out. A profile piece on a respected news program that focused on arts and culture. The interview would be thoughtful, not sensational. Julian encouraged Miguel to accept. The interview was filmed at Juilliard with Miguel sitting at one of their beautiful grand pianos. The interviewer was a woman in her 50s named Christine, known for her intelligent, compassionate approach. She asked about his childhood, his love of music, his preparation for Juilliard. Miguel answered honestly, his initial nervousness fading as he talked, about the thing he loved most. Then Christine asked the question Miguel had been dreading. "There's been a lot of attention about your first public performance at Victoria Ashford's gala. Can you tell me about that night?" Miguel chose his words carefully. "Mrs. Ashford was very kind to let me play her piano. It was the first time I'd ever played for an audience. I was terrified, but also, it felt like everything made sense when I was playing. Like I was doing what I was meant to do." "And afterward she discouraged you from pursuing music?" Miguel hesitated. He could feel the weight of the question. One word from him could make things worse for Victoria, or he could try to be generous. "I think Mrs. Ashford was trying to be realistic. The music world is competitive. A lot of people told me I probably wouldn't make it. I understand why people would think that. I didn't have training or money or connections. On paper, I had no business dreaming about Juilliard." Christine leaned forward slightly. "But you made it anyway. I got lucky. I had people who believed in me. Father O'Brien at St. Anthony's, who let me practice for hours every night. Julian, who gave me his time and knowledge for free. My mom, who worked so hard so I could focus on music. And even Mrs. Ashford, in a way. Playing her piano that night, even for just those few minutes, it showed me what was possible. It made me want it even more." It was a gracious answer, more gracious than Victoria probably deserved. But Miguel wasn't interested in revenge. He just wanted to move forward. The interview aired 3 days later. The segment about Miguel was beautiful, focusing on his talent and determination rather than the controversy. But the internet still found ways to criticize Victoria in the comments. What they didn't know was that Victoria had watched the interview live. She'd sat alone in her penthouse, a glass of wine untouched beside her, and watched Miguel speak. When he talked about her piano giving him a glimpse of what was possible, something cracked inside her chest. He could have destroyed her. With one bitter comment, one angry word, he could have made everything worse. Instead, he'd been kind. More than kind. He'd found something good in a memory that must have hurt. Victoria turned off the TV and sat in the dark for a long time. The next morning, Rosa arrived for her usual Tuesday cleaning. She'd been dreading this day all week. Part of her expected to be fired. Part of her didn't know if she even wanted to keep working for Victoria. But she needed the job. Juilliard was giving Miguel a full scholarship, but there would still be other expenses. Books, living costs, things the scholarship didn't cover. She let herself in quietly and started in the kitchen like always. Victoria appeared in the doorway. She looked terrible, like she hadn't slept. Her usually perfect hair was pulled back messily and she wasn't wearing makeup. "Rosa, can we talk?" Rosa's heart sank. "Here it comes. She's going to fire me." They sat at the kitchen island facing each other. Victoria's hands were wrapped around a coffee mug, but she wasn't drinking. "I watched Miguel's interview," Victoria said. Rosa waited, not sure what to say. He was very gracious. More gracious than I deserve. Victoria looked up, meeting Rosa's eyes. I owe you both an apology. A real one, not a PR statement. Rosa hadn't expected this. She stayed quiet. I was wrong. About everything. I was dismissive and cruel, and I tried to justify it by telling myself I was being realistic. But the truth is, I couldn't see past my own prejudices. I saw a Maid's son, and I made assumptions about what was possible for him. I didn't see Miguel. I didn't see his talent or his determination or his potential. Victoria's voice cracked slightly. And when he succeeded despite me trying to discourage him instead of being happy, I don't even know what I was. Threatened? Embarrassed? Whatever it was ugly. Rosa felt tears building. She'd worked for Victoria for 8 years and had never seen her like this, vulnerable and genuinely remorseful. Why? Rosa asked quietly. Why did you say those things? You heard him play. You knew he was special. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Because it scared me. His talent scared me. I've spent my whole life believing that success comes from certain backgrounds, certain education, certain paths. Miguel didn't fit that narrative. If he could be that good with nothing but determination and a broken piano in a church, what did that say about everything I believed? What did it say about my own success? She laughed bitterly. I built a fortune in tech. I'm supposed to be innovative, forward-thinking, but I couldn't see talent standing right in front of me because it came in a package I didn't expect. Rosa wiped her eyes. You really hurt us. Both of us, I know. And I'm sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but I mean it. They sat in silence for a moment. Rosa was angry, but she was also tired of being angry, and she could see that Victoria's regret was genuine. What now? Rosa asked. I don't know. I want to help, but I don't want it to seem like I'm trying to buy forgiveness or fix my reputation. That's not what this is about. Miguel doesn't need your help anymore, Rosa said, and there was pride in her voice. He made it on his own. I know. And that's exactly as it should be. Victoria paused. But there are other kids like Miguel out there. Kids with talent who don't have access to instruments or teachers or opportunities. I've been thinking, my foundation is losing sponsors, but I still have my own money. What if we redirected the foundation's focus? Created scholarships specifically for kids from low-income families who want to study music? Rosa looked at her carefully. Is this a PR move? If I wanted PR, I'd make a big announcement. I'm thinking of doing this quietly. Anonymous scholarships. No press releases, no photo opportunities. Just help for kids who need it. Rosa considered this. It wouldn't fix what Victoria had done, but it might prevent her from doing it to someone else. It's a start, Rosa said finally. But you should know I accepted another job. Starting next month. It pays better, and the hours are more flexible now that Miguel will be at Juilliard. Victoria nodded slowly. I understand. You deserve better than this job anyway, better than working for someone like me. You're not a terrible person, Mrs. Ashford. You forgot to see people as people. You saw categories instead. Victoria absorbed this. You're right, and that's something I need to fix in myself. Not for PR, not for my reputation. For me. Rosa stood up. I should get to work. Rosa, wait. Would you and Miguel consider coming here one more time? Before you leave? I'd like to apologize to him in person. Not for the press, not recorded, just so he knows I mean it. Rosa thought about it. I'll ask him. But it's his choice. Of course. That evening, Rosa told Miguel about the conversation. He was quiet for a long time. Do you believe her? He asked finally. I think she's trying. Whether she really changes, that's up to her. But I think the apology is real. Miguel played with the frayed edge of his sleeve. Okay, I'll go. But just once. And then we're done with her. Fair enough. Victoria's world had gotten smaller, but for the first time in months she felt like she could breathe. She'd lost sponsors and reputation, but she'd gained something more important. Clarity. She finally understood what she'd done. And more importantly, she understood why. Now she just had to figure out how to be better. Not for applause or forgiveness, but because it was the right thing to do. 6 months passed before Miguel agreed to visit Victoria's penthouse again. He'd been busy preparing for Juilliard, spending his summer in intensive training with Julian and other instructors who'd offered to help. His life had become a whirlwind of practice sessions, interviews, and preparations for the biggest change of his life. But eventually, Rosa asked him again, and this time Miguel said yes. They arrived on a Sunday evening in late August. The summer heat was finally breaking, and there was a hint of fall in the air. Miguel wore the same thrift store dress shirt he'd worn to his audition, freshly ironed by Rosa. Victoria answered the door herself. No staff, no assistant, just her, looking nervous in jeans and a simple sweater. Miguel had never seen her in anything but expensive business clothes. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "Both of you." They followed her into the living room. The massive space felt different somehow, less imposing. Maybe it was because Victoria herself seemed smaller, less confident. The Steinway grand piano sat in the corner, gleaming as always. Victoria saw Miguel looking at it. "Would you like to play?" "Before we talk." Miguel glanced at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. "Okay," he said. He sat at the bench and his hands found the keys like greeting old friends. He didn't announce what he was playing. He just closed his eyes and let the music flow. It was Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, the third movement. Fast, furious, technically demanding. His fingers flew across the keys with a confidence that hadn't been there 6 months ago. Julian's training had refined his raw talent into something even more powerful. Victoria sat on her couch watching. This time she didn't check her phone. She didn't think about meetings or money or reputation. She just listened. When the final crashing chords faded, the room fell silent. "That was beautiful," Victoria said, her voice thick with emotion. "You've grown so much." Miguel turned on the bench to face her. "Julian's a good teacher." "He is. But the talent was always yours." Victoria took a breath. "Miguel, I asked you here because I owe you an apology. Face to face, not through a statement or the media." Miguel waited, his expression carefully neutral. "I was wrong about you. Completely wrong. When you played at my gala, I saw something that scared me. And instead of celebrating it, I tried to diminish it. I told myself I was being practical, but really, I was protecting my own worldview. I couldn't accept that someone without my advantages could be extraordinary." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "I said things to your mother that were cruel. I discouraged you from pursuing your dream because I couldn't imagine you succeeding. And when you did succeed, instead of being happy for you, I felt threatened, embarrassed, like your success was somehow a judgment on me." Miguel's expression softened slightly. "Why tell me this now?" "Because you deserve to hear it. And because I need to say it. Not for my reputation, but because it's true. I was elitist and narrow-minded, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry I tried to make you doubt yourself. I'm sorry I couldn't see your gift when it was right in front of me. And I'm sorry that it took public humiliation for me to really look at myself." Rosa reached over and squeezed Miguel's hand. Miguel was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady but thoughtful. "You know what the hardest part was? It wasn't that you didn't believe in me. Lots of people didn't believe in me. It was that you heard me play and you still couldn't see it. You were right there listening and you chose not to see." Victoria felt tears building. "You're right, and I have no excuse for that. But," Miguel continued, "I also learned something from it. I learned that I can't wait for permission from people like you. I can't wait for someone to tell me I'm good enough or that I deserve a chance. I have to know it myself." He stood up from the piano bench. "So thank you in a weird way. You made me stronger. You made me more sure." Victoria wiped her eyes. "You're a better person than I am. I don't know about that. I just know I don't want to carry anger around. It's too heavy." Rosa stood too, pride radiating from her. "We should go. Miguel has an early day tomorrow." "Wait," Victoria said. "There's something else. I've been working on something and I wanted you to know about it." She pulled out a folder from the coffee table. "I'm starting a new scholarship fund. It's called the Second Chance Initiative. It's for young musicians from low-income families. Full scholarships for lessons, instruments, whatever they need. It's anonymous. My name won't be on it. I don't want credit or publicity. I just want to help kids who might be where you were a year ago." She handed the folder to Rosa. "I'm also creating a partnership with community centers and churches in working-class neighborhoods. Free music programs, access to instruments, visiting teachers. Father O'Brien is helping me coordinate it." Miguel's eyebrows rose. "Father O'Brien?" "I went to visit him, to apologize for not seeing what he saw in you. He's a good man. He told me if I really wanted to make amends, I should make sure no other kid has to practice on a broken piano in a church basement because they can't afford anything else." Rosa flipped through the folder, her eyes widening. This is a lot of money. It's the least I can do. And I mean that literally. It's the smallest step toward making things right." Miguel looked at the folder, then at Victoria. This is good. Really good. But you know it doesn't erase what happened, right? I know, I'm not trying to buy forgiveness. I'm trying to do better going forward. Okay then. Miguel held out his hand. Good luck with it. Victoria shook his hand, feeling the firmness of his grip, the calluses on his fingers from hours of practice. They left soon after. Victoria watched from her window as Rosa and Miguel walked down the street toward the subway, talking and laughing about something. They looked happy, unburdened. She turned back to her empty penthouse. The piano sat in the corner, silent now. Victoria walked over to it and sat on the bench. She pressed a single key, letting the note ring out in the quiet space. She'd owned this piano for 5 years and had never played it. It had been decoration, a status symbol. She tried a scale, fumbling through it. Then another. She sounded terrible, like a beginner, which is exactly what she was. But she kept trying. The next morning, Victoria met with the board of her foundation. She presented the Second Chance initiative in detail, explaining the vision and the funding structure. This will cost millions, one board member said. I know. I'm funding it personally. And you don't want your name on it? No, the kids don't need to know who's helping them. They just need the help. The board approved it more out of surprise than anything else. This wasn't the Victoria they knew. Over the following months, the initiative launched quietly. Music programs opened in 5 community centers across Queens and the Bronx. 20 students received full scholarships for private lessons. Churches received donations for new pianos and instruments. Victoria volunteered at the centers once a week, not as a wealthy donor, but as someone helping to organize sheet music and schedule practice rooms. She didn't announce her involvement. Most of the kids had no idea who she was. One evening, a 10-year-old girl with braids and a bright smile approached her. Miss Victoria, can you help me reach the pedals? My legs are too short. Victoria found blocks to put under the girl's feet. The girl played a simple melody, beaming with pride when she finished. That was wonderful, Victoria said. And she meant it. I'm going to be a famous pianist someday, the girl announced with absolute confidence. I believe you, Victoria said, and this time she really did. Meanwhile, Miguel started at Juilliard in September. He was nervous at first, surrounded by students who'd had private lessons since age 5, who came from families of musicians, who seemed so much more prepared than him. But when he sat at the piano, none of that mattered. He belonged there. His hands knew it, his heart knew it, and eventually his mind caught up. In November, Juilliard held student showcases. Miguel performed Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2 with the school orchestra. The audience was packed with students, faculty, and guests. In the back row, wearing a simple coat and trying to be inconspicuous, Victoria sat and listened. She'd bought the ticket anonymously. She hadn't told anyone she was coming. This wasn't about her. Miguel's performance was transcendent. He'd grown so much, his technique now matching his natural musicality. The audience gave him a standing ovation that lasted 3 full minutes. Victoria stood and clapped until her hands hurt. Tears streamed down her face and she didn't bother wiping them away. This was what genius looked like. This was what happened when talent met opportunity, when determination met support, when a young person was given a chance to become who they were meant to be. After the performance, Victoria slipped out before the crowd. She didn't try to see Miguel or congratulate him. That wasn't her place anymore. But as she walked through the cold November night back to her apartment, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not pride in her accomplishments or satisfaction with her wealth. Something simpler and deeper. Peace. She'd done something terrible, but she was trying to do better. She'd been blind, but she was learning to see. She'd used her privilege to diminish someone, and now she was using it to lift others up. It wouldn't erase her mistakes. Nothing could. But it was a start. At home, she sat at her piano and practiced scales for 30 minutes, fumbling through them like always. She was terrible, and she probably always would be. She didn't have Miguel's gift, but that was okay. She didn't need to be a genius. She just needed to be better than she was yesterday. On the music stand, she'd placed the program from Miguel's Carnegie Hall debut performance later that year. Someone had sent it to her anonymously, probably Rosa or Father O'Brien. On the cover, she'd written something in her own handwriting, words she read every time she sat down to practice. Genius doesn't ask for permission. It only needs a chance. And underneath, in smaller letters, do better, be better, see better.